All right, so let's get started. I'm not going to bore you with me standing up here talking. Obviously, our topic today is raising financially aware kids. I think we pretty much run the gamut from how kids play a role in our lives, from grandkids to kids out of the house, to kids in the house, to what my wife would say are future kids. So this is very topical, so thank you, Teresa, for your wisdom in advance. I do want to point out over here, this is Brad O'Neill. Brad's with American Century. He helped us make this possible today, so I just want to appreciate Brad being here and putting this together for us. And lastly, Teresa Stewart. Teresa joined American Century in 1987, just as the company was growing to where it is now, a leading asset manager, focused on delivering investment results and building long-term client relationships, while supporting research that can improve human health and save lives. She is the 529 business development consultant, whose responsibilities include partnering with employers to educate their employees about saving for education through a 529 plan. Teresa holds her 6 and 63 licenses and is a certified college funding specialist. I'm not sure what that is. It sounds official. Teresa lives in Kansas City with her husband Mark and their 2 dogs. She has 2 grown children, a son Casey, who is 28, and a daughter Caitlin, who is 22 years old. So she has some experience to share with us. So,
yeah, thank you. So this is very informal, and I come to you as a 529 business development consultant, but also as a parent and now a grandparent. So I have a 2-year-old granddaughter as well, and so made a lot of mistakes along the way as far as raising financially aware kids. In some respects, looking back, did some things really well, and in some respects not so well. If I could do some of it over again, I would. But I want to just tell you a little bit about this. Some of this may not be new to you. Some of these things you may have heard before. Some of it might be some new ideas. But it's all very practical, and we'll definitely have questions at the end. But if you have questions before then, just let me know. We're going to be very informal. And I have been with American Century 32 years. So I started when I was just like 12, and time just flew by. So I've been very blessed and very lucky to still be there. It's a really great company. So we'll go ahead and dive in here. This statistic talks about how parents worry about having enough money to raise their kids. And I just kind of want to set the groundwork to say that we help our kids and our grandkids with all of their schoolwork as far as, their math quizzes and their spelling quizzes and all the things that we do until they get to a point where we really can't help them anymore, which is about 6th grade in a lot of cases. But one thing that we don't talk to them a lot about is about personal finances, and that's something that we can, and they're really looking to us for that guidance. They're looking at their parents and their grandparents for some of that guidance. Parents worry about having enough money to pay for their college education more than any other financial concern. I don't know if you would agree with that or not, but it is a concern. It's expensive to send your kids to college now. But also I just want to underline parents worry because we just worry. We worry from the time they're born, and we keep worrying when they're 28 years old and older. So it just comes with the territory. And you probably have parents that are worrying about you today as well. Brad and I talked about that, and my mom tracks my location to see where I am. And I found a place for lunch today, and she said, "Oh, I see you're at the Liberty Tower Mall," or whatever, so she still worries. It never stops. One of the things is that our kids, we can start talking to them about personal finance, although that sounds very formal, but we can start talking to them about that at a very young age. By 4 or 5 years old, kids understand that they need to pay for things that they want, things that they need. They understand the whole money, and that coins have different values. How many of you are familiar with junior achievement? Is that something that, okay. So I've taught with junior achievement, I'll fall back on that in just a moment, but they do a really good job of coming into the grade schools and really introducing the idea of money and coins and value and all that, because I don't know that it would be taught necessarily in the curriculum if that wasn't there. And so we're going to talk about that again here in just a second. 84% of the teens report looking to their parents for information about how to manage money. This is a statistic actually from junior achievement. And what this really says to me, it reinforces that teens are looking at parents. They're looking at us for guidance. However, 34% of parents say that their family's approach to finances is not to talk about it. So a lot of that has to do with how we were raised, and a lot of how we spend our money has to do with how we were raised. A lot of it has to do with our values, what we choose to spend our money on. We all come with a story, and when we get married, you have two stories that you're blending together. So I encourage you, and we talk about that, I believe, in the book as well, to really talk to your kids and your grandkids about finances, how money decisions were made when you were growing up. What did you have? What did you not have? What did you need? How were decisions made? Were you a part of those conversations or not? And it's good. They want to know these things, and I don't think sometimes that we realize that they're looking at us for that type of information. So we encourage you to really open that conversation up. How far you want to take that really depends on your family and what you feel comfortable with. I'm not saying that you want to let them know how much your mortgage is necessarily. It's just talking about finances and about how we make decisions. I want to point out here, this is kind of a side note. My dad, I'm from Kansas City, and my dad was born in Kansas City, Missouri, and his mom ran a boarding house. So growing up, he had nothing. He lived on the east side, and he didn't have anything, and he didn't even have a room of his own. So the room he slept in was if they had an empty bedroom somewhere in the boarding house. And a lot of times it would be on the living room floor or something, because that's what my grandma did to make money, is she ran a boarding house. And that really stuck in my mind when my dad shared that with us at a young age, and he said, that's why we're very thankful for everything we have, and we work hard for what we have. And I don't know that I really even realized it at the time, the kind of impression that left on me as I've gotten older, and then I even would tell my kids about it. Your grandpa, he didn't even have a bedroom, and you guys are whining about certain things, and so that really did help shape a lot of my thoughts on money and finances and how we spend our money. I'm glad he shared it with us. What we're going to talk about this evening for just a little bit, these are our topics: values and money, learning to earn, saving and investing, budgeting and borrowing. And we'll go ahead and just get started with values and money. So, a need versus a want. This is one of the things, the last several years when I've taught junior achievement, I've taught the third grade curriculum. And third grade curriculum is where we talk a lot about need versus want. And so that is an important part from the time you're this old until now and continuing on, is what is a need and what is a want. And it's interesting to me when I get with these students and they come in and we have this conversation and we have flashcards of different things and we say, is this a want or is this a need? And some things are pretty obvious, and then some things can be a little gray. And it becomes pretty clear to me which kids are familiar with this concept and these things have been talked about at their homes, and which kids really are not as familiar with it. So, and it continues on up to today. I mean, I still have to ask myself, is this a want or is this a need? It's something that never stops. This is just going to show you, if you're not familiar, teenagers, this was a study that was done in 2018, teens really value name brands. So if any of you have had teens, if you were a teen, you probably know that. I have a son and a daughter, and I would say that the name brands definitely were more important to my daughter for some reason than they were my son. It's just the way they were wired. And I would say that I have a sister that's 3 years younger. The two of us, they were more important to her than they were to me. Don't know why. That's just kind of the way we thought. But marketing people, they know this, of course. And this is why they target them, and they target them with these different name brands. They know that it's important to them. That's how they base their decisions on what they want to buy, what they want mom and dad to help buy or to maybe buy for them. So that's the same thing. That's again when you come back to the conversation of wants versus needs. I will give you just a kind of a funny story. At home, at our house, both of our kids have moved out. So in May, our flat screen TV, I don't know if we're like most married couples, but my husband has the area that he watches TV downstairs, and then I have my TV area upstairs. And we each have our flat screen, nothing fancy, but our flat screen TV. Well, his went out in May. So he said, gosh, got to get a new TV. And I said, that's not in the budget, so that's not going to happen right now. And he said, well, that's okay as long as by the time football season starts, we need to make sure, and that's August, we're talking preseason. And I said, well, that should be doable. I don't know why we couldn't do that, so we'll budget that. Kept in the back of my mind, and he would tell me from time to time, oh, there's one on sale here. And I'm like, no, not yet. We still have another month till football season starts. And about 2 or 3 weeks before football season started, our dishwasher handle broke off. You can still use the dishwasher, but you have to shove it hard, and then sometimes you can't get it open, so the handle broke. It still works, but it broke. And I said, no, I don't know that we're going to get a TV because we really need a dishwasher. So that started the whole real conversation of want versus need because, and this is, I'm not making this up, I would say we need a new dishwasher. And he said, we can wash the dishes by hand. And I said, well, there is a little 12-inch television up in the bedroom that you can watch football on too. So, which one is a need, which one is a want? I said, I don't think that you need a new TV, but we need a dishwasher. And we went back and forth, and, we couldn't come to, and football season started, and still no decision. About 2 weeks into football season, he calls me, I'm at home, and he's like, there are flames coming up from the oven. There's fire in the bottom of our oven, and so the oven, the heating element caught on fire. And I said, well, there you go, decision made. Decision made, we're getting an oven. That's what we're getting, because that is definitely a need. And so I tell that because it dawned on me at the time, I was given this presentation, I'm like, we're still having those conversations. And sometimes it's not always clear what is a want and what is a need. But it always comes back around to our values a lot of times and what's important to us. So the oven one, and I share my TV with him now. So on certain football nights, I let him have the TV upstairs to watch his football games, and I will go up and watch the little 12-inch if there's anything on TV. So we worked it out for now, but he still says, Christmas time, I want a new TV.
So your kids are out of the house, you said?
Yes.
That same scenario,
yes.
How old would they have to be for you to use that as a teaching moment?
Oh, gosh, I would probably, maybe even 5th or 6th grade. I think they would understand. And that's a good point, because if they were still in the house, it would have been a good teaching moment to bring up the conversation and say, okay, guys, we have to make a decision here. This is how much, we're going to have to get, and this is a lot of, they're both actually cost about the same. And so, what are we going to do? It would have been a great teaching moment. I think even grade school probably, they understand pretty early on. They do.
I would have taught my son that the dishwasher actually still works if you push it.
Right.
And we have a grill outside, we need a TV.
In all honesty, it was a couple of weeks. I say that decision was made, but it really wasn't, because that's exactly what he said. We could grill, and we could microwave, and we did the crock pot, and we ran out of things to do on those. Then finally, nothing got bought for a couple weeks until we finally all agreed, him and I got on the same page. No, we weren't.
You cannot watch football on a 12-inch.
I know. I'm a giver. I am a giver. And I said, you can have my TV during football nights, because I know that that's important to you. But these things, and this kind of brings up, I don't know if I'm going to bring it up now, because it kind of falls in line with that, as far as one of the things that I think I made a mistake on with my kids is, I know a lot of times, we talk about kids, we're going to get to that here in just a second, about the value of money. What is money? And they learn very young. My 2-year-old granddaughter's already figuring it out, that, everything they want costs money. And it is, I would say, we don't have the money for that. And I think I said that too many times. I said too often, I said, no, we don't have the money for that. No, we don't have the money for that. And I just kind of moved on because I remember a day when my daughter said to me, because again, material things, these things meant more to her. She understood value and cost, and like, it's really cool to have, at the time, I think it was Lululemon was the big deal. It was really cool to have that. We can't have Target leggings. You know, we had to have Lululemon leggings. So she learned it much sooner than my son did. But she said, Mom, are we poor? I mean, you know, she goes, are we really poor? And I said, what? Well, no, what do you mean, are we poor? You know, and she's like, because you're always saying we don't have the money for that. We don't have the money for that. And I'm kind of worried. Like, are we going to be homeless or something? And it dawned on me, I probably said that too much. And I could have and should have made those teachable moments to stop and say, you know what? Here's why, you know, maybe we aren't going to get that, or we're going to talk about it here in a second. But I, like a lot of busy parents, just kind of said, we don't have the money for that, not right now, and we don't need that, and it costs too much, whatever, and just kind of moved them along. So that's something I didn't do very well, actually. So there's 5 essential keys that kids can grasp pretty early that they're really looking at us to teach them, because they may not be learning this in school if junior achievement isn't coming along. And a lot of times as parents and grandparents, we assume that they know these things. And then we find out later that they didn't, or they heard it through someone else. And the first thing is, what is money? So I have the Merriam-Webster dictionary definition is something generally accepted. I know, Google, it's not Google. It is a Merriam-Webster. Money is something generally accepted as a medium of exchange, a measure of value, or a means of payment. So it's just maybe helping them understand the concept of, you know, everything costs money. But again, they're figuring it out probably way before you even realize that they are. And they're also watching us to see how we spend our money, what we make our decisions on. So modeling this whole value, or needs versus wants, is important, because you can say that to them, and then if they see you spending your money maybe on things that they may not feel like, you know, why are we doing that, or why are we going out to eat all the time, or whatever. You know, it's modeling the fact that needs and wants is something that we need to really think about every time we spend money. And if I could go back and have those conversations over, I probably would say, you know, we have a budget that we need to stick to, and this is, we don't have, if we spend the extra money on this, then that means we have to give up something else, instead of just saying we don't have the money for it. And so I would do it differently if I had it to do all over. But teaching them what is money is important, and that's another thing in junior achievement. I think that might even be in the first grade curriculum or something. They learn the coins and what the different coins mean. Gosh, I don't know if with young kids, by the time, you know, they're older, all they're going to know is a debit card. But, you know, they still do talk about the coins and the dollars. The next one, there we go. What do things cost? And they figure this out pretty early too. From a pack of gum, standing in line at the grocery store, to we're going out to get something for lunch. Yeah, you want a burger and a shake and fries? I mean, you know, they figure it out. Everything has a price tag attached to it. And this thing called money is a big deal. And my 2-year-old granddaughter, I would say, she's already figured that out. Well, she'll be 3. But she knows money is a big deal. A lot of things depend on this thing called money. So, again, watching and kind of forming her own ideas from watching how we make decisions and what we do. What is something worth? That's another one, as far as, you know, your coat may cost $60, but that's important because you need to stay warm. A pair of jeans, we can get a pair for $30, or we can pay $60. You know, what is it worth? Also things like going on vacation. You know, we could go here and stay 7 days and 6 nights, but if you want to go here and go to Disney World, we may not be able to go for quite as long or stay quite as long. So we can do things. We can make decisions. I know my husband used to always say to me, Teresa, we can buy anything you want. It just means that we're not going to have something else. So living within your means being important too. And I am very aware of that, and I'm also more and more aware of people who are my friends even, that sometimes are not really living within their means and the trouble that they can get into. So 28-year-old is living out on his own now. He's been in and out, he's come back and forth, he may be back again at some point, but he's out now. And just having a conversation about rent and what it costs, and sure, you can live in a really nice place, but you know, if you have that, then you're gonna have to get a second job to pay your utilities or whatever. You know, you're still gonna have to make decisions. What do you want? What do you need? What's more important to you? You can have it, but it's gonna come at a price, and what is it worth to you to have that? That is just kind of talking about that as well. When they're young, even things, even simple things like, you know, getting a dog. We finally got a dog at one point, and I was like, you know, with a dog, most parents have the conversation about the responsibilities, and we did do that. But then it was also, do you know what a dog costs? And their veterinary bills and all the things that go along with them. And so again, it comes back to, they get the message, money, this thing called money is a really big deal. What is opportunity cost? So with everything that we buy, every decision we make and what we're gonna spend money on, there is a decision to be made, and there may be an opportunity lost. I think the best way to explain this one is, my daughter, when she was growing up, would babysit. And those of you with young kids know, if you have to hire a babysitter, I don't know what they run here, but they're about $10, $11 an hour in Kansas City. So that's a pretty lucrative little business on the weekends for a kid, you know, for her to go out and do. And she was always not super excited about it because she may have to, opportunity cost, she may have to give up something else if she committed to babysitting. So I do remember specifically a time or two where she would commit to babysit, and if it was gonna be 4 hours, that's $40. Something else would come along and she would say, gosh, but I really wanna go do this. And I would say, well, what does that cost? Let's just say it was a concert, and that concert was a $70 ticket. Okay, well, it's really though gonna cost you about $110 because you're giving up the $40 you could have earned, and you're paying the $70 to go to the concert. So do you understand the opportunity cost here? It's that ticket really now is gonna really cost you $110. Sometimes making her see it that way, you know, really think about it. Is it really that important to you to go? Any other ideas around opportunity cost or anything else? Yeah.
Yeah, I actually got a friend who's a client, and one of the things they're looking at is moving out of Jersey.
Okay.
And they're looking at moving out of Jersey because of the cost to live in Jersey.
Right.
And their actual cost to live there to move to Delaware is not going to decrease that much. But the lifestyle that they're going to lose with their kids being local, with being around everything, is a big loss.
Right.
So the measurement between lifestyle versus actual cost.
Right.
You have any thoughts on that?
No, I think that's an important thing to think about. I remember, that makes me think about when I had young kids and thought about for a period of time I wanted to go part-time or stay home. And, you know, could we afford to do that? Because, you know, what we paid in daycare, and I didn't really want to be away from them. And yeah, we could do that. Let's take a look at that though. If we do that, we can't afford to go out to eat anymore. We can't afford to do, I mean, there are things that are going to have to go. We can't take a vacation every summer. You know, there's always, you're giving up one thing to gain over here. Now, it really never came up as an option for me, but it was a lot of times we really thought about it because I thought that is really important to me, and I could give up not going out to dinner. Could have even been as much as, yes, you can, but we're going to have to move into a smaller house. We may have to actually move, and maybe move out of the district, the school district that we want to be in, but then you can stay home with the kids. So, same thing. You can move so that you save money, you know, where you're living, but you may be giving up some other things or gaining some other things. So, that's why I say I don't think it ever stops. It continues on.
No, this is a battle between husband and wife. So it's an interesting battle because the difference is so small.
Right.
Versus the lifestyle is so big.
Right. And do they agree necessarily on how they value that? I mean, are their values the same? And do they both?
One's too focused on the money, and the
Right.
other one's focused on the lifestyle.
Yeah.
And it's not the lifestyle of expenditures; it's more the lifestyle of having family and friends around.
Right.
Which is the interesting part of it.
Right.
So I'm trying to kind of redirect them
Yeah.
on,
that
what
far.
I do for a living too. So,
Well, it is, it's hard enough to make those decisions as a single person,
yeah.
but when you get married, now you have two people who have come into a marriage, with they grew up maybe differently, and values were maybe different in the way that they grew up, or what they think is important to them, and so that does make it even more complicated, I think. So, yeah, good luck with that. I don't know, but it is kind of around that whole opportunity. And I think it is good whenever you can bring the kids in, depending on their age, depending on the topic, and how deep you want to get
Well,
into
they're our
it.
age, so their kids.
So their kids are older.
No.
Okay, their kids are in their
They're our age,
20s.
so we treat them as kids at this point in time.
So are they in on that conversation? Are they talking with them about it as well? That's just more opinions.
Their kids are giving them the same advice that you got to move out.
Yeah.
And just.
Yeah, because then you have other opinions that you have to factor in too. So yeah, it's always a battle. I mean, especially if you're trying to live within your means and not get in trouble. And I don't think it ever pays off to do that. And then the tools for success. If we're talking about young kids, things like piggy banks, and if we're talking about older kids, savings accounts, places they can take their money, places they can put it. Things that they can see, especially with the younger kids. I do like the piggy bank idea, or an idea I like better that I've seen is 3 mason jars for young kids, and maybe let the kids decorate them. And 1 jar is what you're going to save, and 1 jar is what you can spend, and 1 jar might be what you're going to give. If that's something that your family does, whether it's a religious or a charity or what have you. But 3 jars, and the reason I like that, and I used that, I probably should have done it earlier, but they could see it. It was a visual. And putting in paper dollar bills and coins and all that, they could see it, and they could see it come up, and then sometimes on the one that would be the spend or the save, there would be a goal. And sometimes they would come to a goal, and they would change their mind and decide, maybe it's not that important after, I think I'll keep saving. I like seeing the money go up. I like seeing more and more money in there. I think I'll wait. And they learn. There is something in the book about the marshmallow. Have you heard about that?
I'm
Yeah.
doing this with my grandson.
Yes.
We actually have, for a long period of time, we started out with this great big jug that when you put the money in the top, the numbers came up.
Oh, yeah.
Well, we moved it and it got broken.
Oh.
So that was a big crisis.
It got broken.
We tried it. We tried everything.
Yeah.
And he was very little at the time and got a big kick out of that. So now what we've done is we have 3 jars.
Right.
And we labeled each one,
Mhm.
and we spent a lot of, I was surprised how on task at his age he could stay for actually
Mhm.
counting out the pennies.
Mhm.
I mean, we just kept throwing change in it, and occasionally there'd be dollar bills or $5 bill. So
Yeah.
now that's all organized in 3 different jars. Now now what do I do with it? Because he's got the money, he has a little bit of spending cash in his pocket, which I don't know if he's spending it on anything.
Mhm.
But I thought about opening up a bank account for
Right.
him. And I thought we would go together.
Right.
And explain to him that this is going in so he can save money and
Right.
earn a little interest. I don't think he understands the concept.
How old is he?
He's just 9. So.
Yeah, maybe not the interest part, but that's something.
Yeah.
It's they give you money if you leave your money in there.
Oh, yeah. Right.
You get free
A
money,
little
a
bit.
little bit of free money for the money that you leave in there. No, I think it's a great idea. And taking them to the bank. When we had a jar that got big enough, one of the things that my daughter would still talk about is we went down to the bank, because they really don't go into the bank anymore. I mean, really, the kids
Right,
don't.
that's what I.
But we went in there and they had a big machine, and you could take the coins and you dump them in, and it counted it out. And she came up with like $32, and she was so excited about that.
And the reason we didn't do that was because the banks charge you.
Oh, they do?
They take 10%.
They take 10%.
Oh, we got lucky then, because I think maybe because we had an account there. I don't know, but yeah. But it's a visual, and the important thing is it's a visual.
We got the sleeves and we have it all stacked
Yeah.
up, pennies and nickels and that. He had a good time doing that.
And you will find in a lot of times that then they don't want to spend it when they can see it, when it's a
Yeah.
visual and they can see it.
He's already
And-
doing that.
Right. How many of you are familiar with the marshmallow? It's not a trick. What is it?
Test.
Test.
Marshmallow test.
The test, yeah. Because I wish I'd known that when my kids were younger, because I know
Yeah.
exactly what each one of them would have done. But it is the idea of putting that in front of them and saying, if you don't eat it, in the 5 minutes I'm gone, when I come back, you'll get another one. Now, I know my son, he'd have been gone in half a second. You know, he's my 28-year-old that is in and out, and I mean, we could talk all night. But my daughter probably, it would have been hard for her, but she probably would have sat there and she would have, the 5 minutes would have been excruciating, but she probably would have done it. So, you know, and that's kind of the same sort of idea. If you can wait, be patient, you can have a goal, we can write a goal for your spend or your save. Many times they'll get there and they'll say, you know, that's not that important to me now. I think maybe I'd rather keep saving. Or maybe I do want to spend it. Well, that's great. That's why you saved it. So it's okay to do that. That was your goal and you reached your goal. So that's not a bad thing. So those are just some tools to help them. Now we're just going to kind of go into learning to earn. This is maybe surprising. How many of you have kids that could earn an allowance if you chose to pay an allowance? Are they allowance earning? Okay. So are you surprised by this slide about what the average allowance is according to this? No? Okay. Okay, so the average for a child under 12 is $6 a week, and the 13 to 17, I guess that would be an allowance, although I think by the time you're 14 or 15, you can be getting a job. So mine were both getting a job by that point. But and there's really three basic schools of thought when it comes to allowances. And I'm not saying that one is right and one is wrong, because it also comes to the whole idea of how you were raised and how you look at that. It's a very personal family decision on your view. I have a sister and a brother, and none of us did it the same way with our kids. One is that they get a set amount every week, and it's an expectation that they're going to do certain things, and they're going to behave, they're not going to get in trouble, they're going to do their schoolwork, and that's just an expectation. But they get this money regardless. The second is the money is tied to the chore, and it's tied to an expectation. So you can have, my sister was one that had this huge, what was that paper? The big chart, and she had stickers and lines, and it took way more time than I would have done. But it is everything that had a value to it. And if you emptied the dishwasher, you had certain chores, and if you did them, you got, the payday was every Friday. And the thought being that the first idea in her mind was setting them up to have an expectation that they're going to get money no matter what, an entitlement. This one is you'll earn based on what you do. And so I would say with the second one, you just have to be very clear on what that expectation is, and you have to be consistent. Yes?
So we drove our kids crazy, but they do have fond memories now looking back on it.
Ah.
We had family meetings once a week.
I heard.
Yeah.
You guys are famous.
Yes. Yes, we were interviewed.
Yes.
So what we did was, it was a lot of fun. It was like Sunday afternoon, the day we knew there was no games,
Right.
whatever, for the kids being all over, like at lunchtime.
Mm-hmm.
And we have we still have the binder. We were crying looking at it.
Oh, I think it's a great idea.
But it was a binder, and we had expectations. So we had 4 children, and every week, so we had if you were a living room, it was like vacuum, dust, whatever it was.
Right.
We had lists, like your bedroom.
Yes.
Beds. So whoever had kitchen's always the hardest because it's the kitchen and everybody thinks.
Nobody
it's
wants
in
the
my
kitchen.
house. Okay. So the beauty of what we did was, and we got it from an old book, and I don't even know where we found it, the idea, but it was brilliant, I think, and this is just for people with little kids who are gonna have to look at it. The kids learn the value of a dollar, so every kid had a room, plus everybody was responsible for their own room.
Right.
So they shared a bathroom, so somebody might be bathroom, somebody else's kitchen, somebody's basement, somebody's living room,
Mm-hmm.
but everybody's responsible for their own stuff.
Right.
So if you walk in the back door, kick your shoes off, and the person is trying to mop that floor, they would say, you guys take your shoes to your room. And if they didn't, they could charge them at the weekly meeting.
That is brilliant. And then it makes you not the bad guy.
So they would write tickets to eat, Thursday,
Right.
I told Ashley to move her shoes, and
Right.
she didn't.
Right.
$1.
Yeah.
I'll take them. But what happens is,
Yeah.
Ashley's got to clean the bathroom.
Right.
And they don't pick up their tab.
Ah.
She's gonna charge. So all of a sudden, everybody starts working together because nobody wants to be charged.
Right.
So we're dishing out cash, and they were punishing each other.
And you have nothing to do with it.
Well, it's in writing here, you gotta.
Yeah.
What do you say?
I may not have charged you if it was up to me, but it's not up to me if it's your sister.
There's rules, so what happens
Yeah.
is, I'm just letting you know, I'm
Right.
taking your shoes upstairs.
Right.
And I'm not gonna charge you.
Oh, got
And
it.
then when the next person leaves the towel on the bathroom floor, I got you. I'm gonna hang up your, right?
Right.
So they learn to work together.
Great.
I mean, there was a couple.
Sure.
Ugly scenes.
Sure.
And we have them written down.
And my daughter took minutes. And it was like a.
So that's the binder.
Calendar, we had a whole, what's that called, when you have a meeting, the order.
Agenda.
As
The
I know,
agenda,
it's a
Robert's
rule of
rules,
Robert's
yeah,
rules,
we
yeah.
had the whole thing. And it was so, it was fun for us, but they
Sure.
really learned
Right.
that, you know, it's not convenient for me to take my shoes off
Right.
right now in the middle of a math problem, help me out, and
Right.
and it worked together. So and I
Right.
kept saying to them, you know, I am not a slave or a maid. We're a community, and everybody has to pitch in. And that
Right.
was, to me, the goal. And they made their money,
Right.
and they could spend it.
Right.
And we have long-term goal kids,
Right.
not so long-term goal kids.
Sure.
But it was their money.
Right. Right. No, that's very good. And it'll be interesting when the grandkids come along, you know, because that's their story. So they'll be telling their kids at some point, you know what we did?
We have 8 years of data that they can read back.
You never, they may all do it as well. They may
We
enjoy.
have all the
Right.
stuff.
But there was lessons learned, because the main thing is, and I think that's also talked about, is that we're going to make mistakes. I've already told you, I failed in several different, you know, areas. I did some things really well, and I take credit for those. And the things that we didn't do well, I say is my husband's fault. But there are some things we did well and some things we didn't. And the same thing with the kids. There are some things that they'll do. Some of them pick it up quicker. Some of them don't. Some of them are more invested and others. I have a niece who, my sister had the chore chart, right? And there was a value associated with it. My niece is, to this day, she's very lazy. And we found out their chores were getting done. So my sister thought she was really doing something. Come to find out, she was paying her younger sister the money to do that. But I said, you know what? She still learned. I mean, she learned something. She learned to negotiate with her. You still learn something out of that, you know? Yes. Peer pressure?
Yeah, when our kids were growing up, we were in a wealthy community,
Mhm.
and it was not unusual for kids to get $100
Sure.
a allowance.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Our
Oh,
kids
yeah.
would come to us and said, "You're out of your mind.
Right.
They would ask us that.
You're not getting no
My
allowance."
friend
First of all,
so-and-so, his dad gives him $100 every week, just
Well.
however he wants to.
That's great. I actually,
In this house.
well, I can tell you, and I think it comes back to, again, your story. You know, we want to do things a little differently in our family. This is how we're going to do it in our family. I'm not saying that your friends are wrong. I'm not saying that their family is doing it all wrong. But I'm saying I can only speak for our family, and this is how we're going to do it. Because I actually did have, in Johnson County, Kansas is where I live with my kids now. And they're the haves and the have-nots. We are pretty much on the have-not side. Definitely not over in the haves side, where there's a lot of money, and there's not a lot of in between, it seems like. So there's a lot of peer pressure. And there's a big joke in the high school that my kids went to, that the parking lot where the students drive, those cars are way nicer than where the staff parks. You know, they'll say that. And it is a lot of, they turned 16 and they got keys to a brand new, $25,000, $30,000 car. But at that point, I feel like we'd already laid the groundwork that in some ways good, in some ways bad. Bad, I was probably saying too much, we don't have the money. But good, that I would say, I never wanted to put that down. I would say, that's great. I'm glad that they have, that their parents can afford that, if that's the way they want to do it. But that's not how we're going to do it. And you know what? I had to buy my first car, and my sister and I had to share a car for quite a while, and it was a piece of junk, and my mom and dad left it up to us to figure out who was going to get to drive it and not. They didn't want to have, they said, you two figure it out. So I wanted to get my own car, being the oldest, and I had to save up for it. And not that my mom and dad, and not that I think parents shouldn't, I mean, they helped me as far as giving me, here's my opinion, I don't know that would be a good decision, but it's your money, you can decide. But I said, you know what? I really valued that car a whole lot more because I worked for it and I earned it, and I'm really hoping that that's what you'll do. So even if we had the money that I could buy you a $30,000 car, I probably wouldn't do it. And I'm not saying that your friends are wrong. That's their family. That's up to how they want to do things, but that's not how we're going to do it. And honestly, there wasn't a whole lot of arguing or conversations because I think early on, we're not going to be able to compete with that. And so if you start competing with it in certain areas, it becomes very hard to pick and choose, where you're going to be able to compete and where you're not. So it was, we're going to live within our means, and we're going to base our decisions on what we feel like we can afford as a family. And same thing with vacations. We're not going to Europe. We may get to go to Texas. That may be it. But that's going to be a great trip, and that's what we're going to do. And I think early on they knew that. So that's the best thing I can tell you is just always basing it on what we can do, and these are our decisions. And I think it really did help to say even if we could do it, I probably wouldn't, because I don't know that that's how I want you to think about your first car. I want you to work for it. I want you to be proud of it.
I think kids do learn that.
They do.
Based on what you're saying. Because as the neighborhood we were living in, people had yard service and they had a company that came out and shoveled out they had like a plow to get your, So we used to make our kids do it. Go shovel the driveway so your dad can get in when he comes home from work and go mow the lawn, that sort of thing.
Right.
And I used to just tell him we build character. He said, how come they're not getting any character building next door? It's just not
Or maybe they're getting a different kind of character building. I don't know, I mean, I think if you can set it that way from the beginning, it does help, because I don't really, there weren't as many questions about it as I was afraid there would be.
Yeah.
Things that I thought we were going to have more problems than we did, and we really didn't. They were grateful for what they had.
Right.
They knew certain things weren't even worth asking about,
Right.
and they were fine with it. So, but if we had given them everything they wanted up to that point, and then said, now we're going to kind of change the rules, I think that would have been a much harder thing to do. This is talking about the average wage, and I did. My kids were both working at 14 and 15 years old, and that's probably about right for that. And the rule at our house was, you're either involved in a sport or an activity at school, you're going to do something, or you're going to work. You're not going to come home and watch TV, and you're not going to come home and play games. So you pick which one. My daughter was more about working and making the money. My son would find every sport in the world that he could do, so he wouldn't have to work. But we still had him do some working as well to make if he wanted any spending money. So this is just kind of a fun fact, I think. And learning to earn. This is another thing as far as for parents, talking to kids about, this is something you may also assume that they know, talking to them about how parents earn money. So we know money's important, they know what it is, they know they have to have it to buy things, they know all of that. So where do you go every day? And where do you disappear and take off for 10 hours a day? And how do you get paid? And I really assumed a lot of times that they would know that. And then when they got ready to get their first job, or my daughter picking a career, that's when we really started talking about, some people make hourly money, and so they get paid by the hour. And so, like, if you stay late, Mom, are you getting over? If you stay late, Mom, are you getting overtime or whatever? Yeah, if I'm an hourly employee, I get overtime if I stay late. So that's kind of how people who work hourly, that's how it works. Now, salary worker, if you're a salary worker, you work overtime, you don't get paid any extra. And they're like, why would I want to do that, Well, because sometimes the job is just a different kind of a job, and they make a salary, and sometimes they work 50 hours a week, and sometimes they may only work 38, and it kind of balances, and it works its way out, and then that's just the way it is. And then they might get a raise at the end of the year. I mean, that's just how some people are paid. And then, if you're in sales, and I have a lot of friends who are in the sales world, and my brother-in-law's been in sales, pharmaceutical sales, for as long as the girls, since they were born. So, they understand, they don't know the dollars, but they know there's a base salary, and then they know that based on the sales, how well Dad's doing, that's kind of where a big chunk of the money comes from. And that's how he gets paid. He gets paid very different than their mother does. And they just kind of know that. So kind of in letting them know that, having them come to work with you sometimes and seeing what you're doing, if they have a bring your kid to work day and see what you do, but even explaining, you know, I am working this weekend and no, I'm not getting paid extra for it, but it's just part of what I do, it's part of my job, and depending on what kind of a job you have someday, it may be part of what you do too, it just comes with it, and having those conversations with them. And it talks about keeping track of their work experience for a resume. I don't know about this necessarily, but I will say that when it comes time for them to apply for scholarships, or if they want to get into fraternities and sororities or things like that, it is a good idea to write these things down, because we had a heck of a time remembering when did you start there and when did you quit and how much did you make, and so keeping a record of it did make it a lot easier.
Every time my kids, I've told my kids, every time somebody says something good about you, especially an employer
Right.
specifically, or a teacher, have them put it in writing.
Yeah.
And my daughter came back to me, my 29-year-old came back to me at 28.
Right.
Said, hey, I got this job, and this is what I showed them. And it was all the resume stuff that she had from high
Oh,
school.
that's great. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I was thinking more
Anytime they say
about,
something good about you, put it in writing.
right, put it in writing. That's a good idea.
Do you see like a difference in the type of work that kids do, like
Mhm.
like manual labor versus other
Mhm.
types of jobs or internships? Do you think that impacts them? I did a lot of manual labor when I first started.
Yes.
And I think that was a good thing.
I do think it's a good thing. I do think it's a good. One of my best friends, whose son was the same age as my daughter, and they were very well off. And they had a guy that would come and do their yard for them, because they both worked and they just had a long guy. And when he hit high school, she talked to her husband. She said, "You know what? I think we need to let Tony go for a couple of years and let Luke do it. I know we don't have to, but I think it'd be good for him to do it." And he wasn't real happy about it, but he would tell you now at 23, I think he would say now that that was a really good experience for him to learn that. And you know what? And it was also probably teed up in the way, knowing my friend, as we can take that money that we were spending on that and we can maybe spend it and do something different as a family or whatever, talking about kind of the benefit of it. I do think it is. I think it's just like, I don't know about when you grew up, but when I grew up, every Saturday morning, and I tell my kids this, and they're like, I don't see Grandma and Grandpa doing that. And I'm like, because they are different people now as grandparents. That's not the mom and dad I grew up with. They were a lot meaner when I was growing up. But I would say, we were raised on Saturday mornings that we had chores to do. Clear, I was in my teens driving, because I remember my friends would say, "Hey, do you want to go to the mall?" And I'd say, "I can't till I get done." "Oh my gosh, your parents are so mean." But we had to split the house into the dusting, the kind of the chores like you said, and then when we got done with that, unless it was the middle of the winter, my dad had us go out and help him clean out the cars. Family car, you're riding in it too. One of you vacuum this car out, one of you vacuum that car out, So we just knew on Saturdays that that's what we did. I don't see that happening a lot anymore.
I'm more like, I meant like just the type of labor that like you were talking about starting a job.
Yeah.
Like the first couple of jobs that I started with were manual labor.
Right.
So I don't know if I
I
know
don't
that I
know
can
that it
only
has
do that
to
stuff
be.
forever.
I don't know that it has to be, but I think it can be good. I think it can be. I know for this Luke, for example, it was good to show him, you can go out there and do this, because he was into sports, so getting a job was going to be really hard for him to do. So you know what you can do? You can mow the grass, and you can do it instead. So I think every family is a little different. Every family, it depends on what works for them. But definitely doing something, I think, is important.
Do you think it's more difficult to show the value of money now that we're switching to like credit cards and
Yeah.
debit cards? Because
Yeah.
I have this idea of when
Yes.
I was younger, I saw exchange of money and something was taken away and I was given something, or checks, something was given away and I was
Yeah.
given something with my mom, and now it's like I just swipe a card.
Right.
I feel like it's very difficult for kids. So how do
Yes.
you translate that into letting them know
Yes.
that there's something on this card that is being taken away?
It's hard. It's harder. It's a little bit, it's not as much of a visual now. I do remember when my son needed something, and I don't remember what it was, and he needed something, and I said, "Casey, I can't right now. We don't have the money for it right now." And he said, "Just write a check. Can't you just write a check?" And I said, "Oh, light bulb." I assumed he understood how that worked. And I said, "Well, teachable moment. I can write that check, but when they take it to the bank, there's no money there, so it's not going to work. So you can write checks all day long if you want to, but trying to understand there's money in an account there, and if there's no money there, or if you swipe a card now, I think it's harder for kids to live within their means. A little bit harder now because they can swipe a card. It's so easy, and you don't even know how much you spent. You don't even know. At my 28-year-old, I mean, at the end of the week, he's blown a lot of money. He doesn't even realize how much he's blown because you just swipe a card and you don't even realize it. You don't know. I do think it's a little harder.
Yeah, because I think a young child, like a 9-year-old, wouldn't get that. Like when you say like they're starting, that's the age they're starting to understand it.
Yeah.
I feel like I got it when my mom gave money away and I saw it go away, or a check was
That's
taken
why I
away.
think the visual with the coins and the dollars and all that still is good when
So
they're
get
younger.
cash out when you
Yes,
okay.
I definitely think so. And then like you did, maybe take them to the bank and say, we're gonna open up a savings account now, and here's the book, and it tells how much money you have here. We're gonna write it down. Now, when you get a little older, you'll probably start using a debit card or something, but for now, this is how we're gonna, they need a visual.
Got it.
So we lived in the beginning of that world where
Yes.
debit cards were used a lot, checks were used. We had that same issue. Is can't
Yes.
just write a check.
Right.
So I had them create a form in their book and balance it out every single week. We had these meetings. And if they said, can we just write a check? It's like, do you have enough money after you subtract that from what you have in the bank or from what you have in that piece of paper? And if they did, they could, you know. So
And see, those are the things we're
teaching a
talking.
visual aspect.
Yeah, because they're not learning that in school.
Right. No.
They really are not learning that in school, and they're not learning what interest is.
And I wouldn't want any of the teachers or the principals
No.
teaching them that.
That's
They don't
true
understand.
too. That's true too. But it's not, it is more, it probably does belong more in the home, you know, it probably so. But I think many times as parents, we just kind of think that they know that. So, you know, this is we're skipping ahead, and, but credit cards. So my daughter, very responsible, got a credit card when she went to KU. And a great thing at the students, you get a $500 limit. So I knew at $500, you know, that was the worst trouble she was going to get into. But she could learn how to use that and establish credit. So that's what she did. And so sometimes, you know, I actually was encouraging her to charge it, which kind of felt not good. But I said, you know what, you can charge that. You need to just pay it off. As soon as you get the bill, we'll pay it off. And now she still has that student card. And so she had to pay for a ski lift ticket or something up in Denver. And she didn't have enough money to pay it off when it came. And I said, well, pay half now. She's waiting on her student loan to come in. I said, pay half now and then pay the other half next month. You just have to carry it over. And she said, you can do that? And I said, yeah, you can do that. So she gets the next bill and she calls me. She's like, okay, they messed up on my credit card because there's this fee on here, something about, you know, I think it said INT something. And I'm like, oh, well, that's interest. And she said, I mean, really? She said, what is that? And I said, well, if you didn't pay it all off, you have to pay interest. And she said, you didn't tell me that. You didn't explain that to me. I said, you know what? You're right. I didn't. And she's like, they can do that? They can charge me? And I said, yes, because you spent money you didn't have, basically. So, but again, assuming that they know these things, and they really don't. And she's like, gosh, Mom, that would have been nice if you had told me up front that I could have decided. So it's my fault. But, you know, it is that whole assumption of we think they understand these things. She goes, Mom, where would I have learned that? Who would have told me that? And I said, you're right. You're absolutely right. I should have explained the whole thing to you, and I didn't. I assumed that you would know, and that was wrong. So
Education comes with time, effort, and money.
yes. Yes. But then I also said, but it's not my fault. It was your ski lift ticket anyway. So we can go down that path. Exactly. So we're kind of winding down the saving and investing. This is just talking about saving, which we've done a good job with. We've talked a little bit about this already, setting their goal, watching it grow. We've talked about a lot of this. And then introducing the bank. We've talked about that. You know, I don't know how important banks are going to be in 15 years or what have you. They're changing a lot, you know. So one of our banks at home, and probably here, you have it too, it's almost like now they want the banks to kind of be this Wi-Fi cafe place. So come hang out with us and do your homework or whatever here, and we've got, you know, it's a whole different experience. It's not like the banks that we used to know. So, and checks. Say that?
Capital One downtown here. It's not a
Right.
It's a cafe.
It's a whole different experience, and it will be even more so as time goes on. And writing checks, they don't know how to write checks. They don't write
clients
checks.
to write a check for taxes, and they're like, oh,
Right.
I'm gonna have to get a checkbook.
Or go get a counter check.
And like,
Yeah, exactly.
like
When my-
flabbergasted, like that's the only way you can pay.
Exactly. Well, and that's exactly when it came up for my son. The first time he owed taxes because he didn't take enough out. That was a whole nother life lesson. But he didn't take enough out, didn't realize eventually you're going to have to pay. And so he had to get a check. So he went down, had to pay, I think it was $3 to
Yeah,
get
a
some counter
cashier's
checks.
check,
Yeah. You know, a thing of 4 checks,
Yes.
and they charge them. They don't have checkbooks. They don't know how to write a check. They don't, what do I write in here? What do I put here? So it's changing. The whole banking thing is changing. And we're just all going to have to evolve along with it and see how it goes. And we'll talk about the debit cards and whatever else comes after that, you know. So this is not really outdated, but kind of. It kind of is. It's evolving. And so the stock market, I don't know how many of you talk about stocks and bonds with your kids. That's a riveting conversation at dinner. It's a lot of fun to talk about that. But because I work with that at my job, you know, it has come up a couple of times. And junior achievement, it is something I think maybe at the 6th grade level, they do talk and they have a stock market game. So they do learn a little bit about it. But I think it's good just, you know, talking with them a little bit when the opportunity seems right. A great opportunity a few weeks ago, maybe it's been a month now, the market was down like 800 points, all over the news. So if you're sitting there with your kids and that comes up, you know, that's maybe a teachable moment to say, you know, do you know what that means when that happens, you know? Not that we're going to get into the economy and interest rates and all that, but basically when, you know, like this is what I said, my retirement plan is invested in stocks and bonds like most people, and mutual funds, and talk a little bit about what that is. Everybody puts their money together. It's called diversify, and you're not putting all your eggs in one basket. And so that day that the market went down 800 points, if I were to call or go online and see what my retirement plan is worth, it would have probably been much lower than it was maybe the day before. But here's the good thing. It doesn't matter because I'm not touching that money for you know, another 10 years or more. And it'll go back up tomorrow. And so just kind of understanding that stock market moves every day. And, you know, when they say they lost money, they didn't really lose money unless they cashed it out and they walked away that day. Otherwise, the value went down. That's a good concept for kids to understand. The value is going up, the value is going down, but when somebody says they lost everything, they may not really have lost everything. The value will probably come back up at some point. So we talked about it somewhat just because it's kind of what I do.
So how old are they when you talk about that? Just because
Grade
there's
school.
a lot of adults that don't even.
No, you're right. You're right. So I would say not before 6th grade, probably. I think it's at
Really?
6th grade is junior achievement.
Wow.
I'm guessing. I mean, I'm not an authority on it, but I think
Yeah.
junior achievement introduces it a little bit. But you're right. We have a program in Kansas City called KC Scholars, and it's a scholarship program by the Kauffman Foundation. And so a little part of their scholarship money goes into a 529. So I work with families and I help them set up the 529s. And I have meetings, orientation sessions with the kids and the parents, and sometimes the grandparents if they're raising the kids. And so, you know, we have these conversations, and you're exactly right. I said, so they say, so how much interest will I make on this money?
Right.
Well, it's an investment, and it's an investment in stocks, bonds, mutual funds. And a lot of times, these are high school age kids. They kind of get it, but the parents don't, because maybe it was never talked about. They don't really understand it. And the kids are kind of going, yeah, I've heard a little bit about that, you know, and say, you know, so I can lose money? And that's a concept of, well, yeah, I mean, that value is going to go up. The money's going to go in on this day, and the value is going to go up and down. And it doesn't have to be complicated. It's just depending on what's going on in the market and what have you, it's going to go up and down. And it doesn't really mean anything to you unless you cash out, unless you sell. That's when it's going to mean something to you. And so talking to them about that, because sometimes they know more than the parents do. I think a lot of times people are afraid of it because they think it's a really complicated, and it is if you really want to dive into it. But if you keep it pretty simple, and that's why I like the stock market game, you know, you can say, let's pick a stock of a company that you like and let's watch it and see what it does. we're not gonna maybe do anything with real money, we're just gonna watch it, or maybe we do pretend money. And let's just say we bought this for $100 fake money, and let's see what it would make. You know, if you really wanna go, I mean, it's a great lesson. But at a minimum, I think just explaining that a lot of different things in the world can impact what happens, and that can be kind of complicated, and I certainly don't. And I think the other thing is to say, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. Nobody does. And anybody who tells you that they know what's going to happen, you know, you need to be careful, because nobody really knows. And so the whole risk reward, which is the next slide, is kind of talking about the idea being you take more risk when,
Planning capital management doesn't know what's gonna happen tomorrow.
well, they do. Nobody else does. But yes, they do.
Thank you.
And they guarantee it, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, how are we gonna get sued?
All right, gotta cut that.
Yeah, just kidding, just kidding. Yeah, no, just kidding. But no, but I do tell them that. I'll say, you know, you're right. Nobody knows, and they'll say, well, what do you think? I don't know. You know, and those are hard conversations to have a lot of times. So if you talk about it earlier, at least there's a concept that they're familiar with. It won't be the first time they've heard of that. And it won't be the first time they've heard, oh, risk reward, you know, and I'll say to them, with the 529, we're talking about an age-based track. The earlier you start, the better off you are, because, you know, you've got 18 years to write up the market, whatever it does. Now, in retirement, you hopefully have longer than that. So the sooner, the better. Take more risk when you're younger. When you've got more time, take less when you start getting to the point where you're going to need the money. Those are pretty simple concepts that I would imagine by middle school, high school, they can absolutely grasp that. Then when they go get their first job and they find out they've got a 401k, they kind of understand maybe a little bit about what that is. Oh, I'm investing. I kind of remember a little bit about that. You know, they don't have to know all the ins and outs, but I think that's a good thing. Do you have any other thoughts to add to that?
Well, I have a comment. I mean, in my
Yeah.
case, there was, I guess, maybe the unintended consequences. So my parents didn't use a 529 plan.
Okay.
They just used CDs.
Mhm.
So they bypassed that whole
Mhm.
conversation, which gave me the reward of having manual labor jobs to pay for the difference in college. So, you know,
And you're a better man for it.
Like you're thinking.
I think this goes back to what
You
we're
take
saying
care of
about
that
the banks changing.
Yes.
I think kids today, the instant gratification.
Yes.
Instant.
Yes.
We didn't have that growing up.
Right.
Like,
It's a different world.
You didn't hit a button on Amazon and it's
Right.
delivered in 20 minutes.
Right.
So, you know what I mean? We had to save and
Right.
work. So I think it's very difficult for the young people raising younger kids because you're,
Yeah.
They
It's the
know
marshmallow
a lot.
test kind of still.
so this risk, you know, they thinking 20 years ahead.
Right.
They're like,
Right.
I'll be dead in 20 years, you know?
I would
that-
say also
Mhm.
though,
That's
if-
right.
I don't have kids, but I think it has a lot to do with your
Keeping
own
kids.
attitude towards that stuff. Right?
Remember early on, what
Just
you're
because you
modeling,
grasp that.
what you're modeling for your kids, they are noticing from a very early age. They are noticing that, and not that you have to get into the dollars and all that, but you know, with a 529 is another great time to say, you know, mom and dad, we've set up an account for college, and so at holidays or birthdays, we're going to ask for some contributions into your college fund, which sounds horrible to them at that, you know, when they're at a young age. And it took me a few years to get my parents on board with that, but I said, wrap up one gift if you want to. I know you want to wrap something up, but then they will appreciate it later. And it is the instant gratification.
Like, I grew up, my parents said, you have to have a Christmas club, do you remember?
Sure, I have one. Absolutely.
$10 a week, I would take
Right.
out of my paycheck or whatever it was,
Right.
and I had all this money to spend on,
Right? Yeah.
that just doesn't make
It doesn't. So that's where they're looking at you, and they're looking at you to see. They're looking to see, how am I supposed to be doing this? How do we do that at our home? How do we handle that? What do we do at holiday time? Does mom go? I mean, do we go and just put a lot of stuff on plastic, and then I see her really stressed out, and crying the next couple months after? Or, you know, how is that working? Because it is kind of a.
Is that not the right way?
Who am I to say that? You know, I'm just, you know, they are watching, and so it always comes back to, what do we value? Let's make decisions. What's a want? What's a need? What are, you know? And let's talk about it. And as far as, so 529 as an example, you will get a gift, because I know your grandma wants to get you a gift. You will get something, but you're also going to get some money that'll go into your college savings. And when you get to be a junior in high school, that's going to be really important to you. And honest to goodness, junior year in high school for my daughter, knowing she was going to be a 4-year college student and now a grad student, we sat down, most kids do by their sophomore or junior year of high school, and you start having that conversation. So here's what we have to work with. So now, where are you thinking you want to go? And living in an area where there are kids who are going to very expensive private colleges that are 40, 50, 60,000, a year. But this is what we have to work with, and this is what we've saved. And then I would say your grandma and grandpa would help out. And she said, gosh, I wish they would have done more. I probably could have done without the wrapped gift every year. I guess I could have. I wish I had known that then. That's okay. I mean, it's all right. You still have more than you would have had if she'd still bought you all the gifts that you didn't need. So having those conversations, and that really is our last thing, is kind of getting into the 529 a little bit, and saving, and budgeting and borrowing. Just kind of, budgeting, we know that's important, and the borrowing is important, and that's the last thing I was going to talk about, was just borrowing for college. Everything always kind of comes full circle. It kind of goes back to that ROI. So, we can spend this amount of money on college. Well, let me ask it this way. You've probably seen this in the news. Student loan debt, what do you think it is? So have you guys heard what it is?
$1.5 trillion.
How much?
$1.5 trillion.
$1.5 trillion, more than credit card debt, more than mortgage, more the highest debt that we have, yes. And so it's a problem. And so things are starting to happen. 529s have been around since 2000. They're a great way to put money aside and get a great tax benefit, because your earnings are growing tax deferred. And then as long as your student uses them for their college education, and that's tuition, books, fees, anything that they need to have, then those earnings are tax free. Sooner you start, the better. All those kind of things. It comes back because you're going to have that conversation about what can we afford and stay within our means. If we pay $80,000, so my daughter went to KU, it's about $21,000 a year. $84,000 for 4 years. I didn't have $84,000 in the 529. Now that's sticker price. She did get some scholarships and some other things that helped out a little bit, but it was still, pretty close. But you're right, that's a public in-state college. And so looking at that, but if you're going to go out and get a $30,000 a year job, and we had to borrow all that money, we need to talk about that. In her case, I knew that grad school was also something she wanted to do. So we looked at, it was a big conversation about ROI. How much money are we going to have to take out in undergrad? Now she's in Denver doing grad school. It's on her. She's taking out student loans. Really put pen to paper to think about, that. And you just have to make those decisions on how much do you want to spend on that. But if you can use some savings like 529s along the way, it helps out. I think that's really, I feel like I've kept you long enough. I don't know if you have anything else. I know you have something to